Welcome to our second interview in our political series. If you're not aware, we are in the midst of a federal election. Today, we have our local candidate for the Green Party on the podcast. I'm Ryan Snyder, and this is the Take a Look podcast. Erica, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Well, let's just start and just kind of dive into your background a bit. Who are you, and how did you get to this place where you want to throw your name in the hat for a member of parliament?
That's a big question. Who am I? That's a great question. I'm from the county. I grew up playing sports, and I had a lot of friends in the area. And when it was time to go to school, I went to Ottawa, went to Carleton University. While I was in Ottawa, I was quickly promoted with the company Glentel to be a sales manager for lots of flagship locations in the area. And I was given the opportunity to do a lot of training and development. Glentel invests a lot in their employees, and I was able to have different training when it comes to time management, organization, development. And from there, I gained success quickly. And I was able to expand my team and train and grow to actually be one of the most successful district teams in the area. And I had my own only female-led management team in the country.
Oh, wow.
I have leadership skills. Some people have technical skills. Turns out that mine's leadership. So when I was in Ottawa, I was able to graduate from Carleton, and after that I went to college. I went to Algonquin College. I got a diploma in computer programming, and then I attended Centennial College and got a advanced diploma in health informatics technology. And I moved back to start a family. While I was here, I did a certificate in project management. So I have a lot of background in school. Mm-hmm. How did I end up with the Green Party?
Yeah, what brought you even just into the political realm? Because you were working private sector.
Yeah.
In leadership role.
Yeah.
Why politics? What drew you into that realm?
It's funny. Always thought my brother would have been the politician in the family. But what happened was I got really motivated to help the environmental impact that climate change was having in this area. When I came back, I realized that there were a few things that changed that I wasn't really happy with. And particularly, I wasn't happy with the treatment of garbage and recycling and just the disbursement of things across. I never saw that before around here. We were always pretty clean. We were always well taken care of. And it hurt to see our beautiful Bay of Quinte in this way. Growing up in the county, I had so much respect for this area. I biked everywhere, and I was able to be involved in community events. And then when I came back, I noticed that there were changes that could be made, but we needed people to enact changes. And that's where I kind of met the hurdles of understanding that there's legislation involved, whether you want to make things better or whether you don't want to make things better. And so the best way to be active in improving your surroundings is to get involved with a political party that has a foundation that allows you the opportunities to express yourself and gain momentum and gather a team to accomplish things. The Green Party seemed to align with all of my values because they're very science-based. All of their solutions are based on fact, and they're willing to adapt their policies when new facts arrive. That, for me, is so much different than what I see from the major parties in the sense that a lot of opinions are involved or feelings. And having gone through much school as I did and how much training, I've kind of taken an avenue in my life where I use facts and I'm willing to take a step back when someone tells me that what I believe is wrong. Because if a belief is not necessarily based on fact. And I like to grow, and I like, believe it or not, to be told that I'm wrong. Because when you're wrong, you learn. And when I'm wrong and I make mistakes, other people can learn from that if I communicate those mistakes. So when it came to the Green Party, I joined, wanted to change the world, and it just so happened that they needed a candidate. Like I said before, my skills is leadership. I'm not always the smartest person in the room, but I am definitely able to access resources to communicate ideas properly. So with the Green Party, we have a lot of really, really smart people who are great advocates that don't necessarily want to put themselves on stage and want to be forward-facing because they're not comfortable with it. One of the most common comments I get when I say that I'm a candidate is, "Ooh, I could never do that." And that's okay.
Yeah.
You don't have to have all those skills. But through my training and development, I've gained those skills. So the best thing I can do to offer my community is put myself in a position where I can execute those skills in an effective way. I don't expect myself to win, but I do know that I can get it up there and be great opposition, because our democracy deserves great opposition. We deserve some people who are going to be willing to ask the right questions and hold other people accountable and be very uncomfortable in that process, because it's not easy, but it's what I can do. So it's what I can offer.
So you aligned with the Green Party on a lot of, obviously, the environmental stuff. As far as like the role of the Green Party in Parliament, because we're coming from a government where there's only 2 seats. Federally, the polls, you guys are about 1%.
Yep.
And maybe I've heard, I just looked this morning, there's I believe is it the Nanaimo riding where there's a close race there for the with the Conservative candidate. So that maybe another seat coming your way. But I guess 2 questions.
Okay.
Given that the Green Party historically not getting a lot of seats, why did you choose the Green Party to align with as far as getting in there? Because you say you don't expect to win, so why the Greens? Why not say another party that may have a bit more of an edge to actually gain more seats?
Okay. I'm going to answer that first by saying that the edge that you see from the other parties that have more seats is directly due to funding and time. And you know that time is money. So we would have more of a competitive edge if we were getting funded in the same way. But we're not going to be getting funded in the same way because our policies don't align with major corporations who are trying to encourage our government to enact policies that help them. We're not for that. We're for the little guys. And we're for speaking out on for things that don't necessarily have a voice. So when I choose the Green Party, I expect that when I communicate our platform and I communicate their ideas, that it gets our constituents thinking. And maybe from that, they talk to their representatives. That was a good idea. Maybe we could try something like that. One thing that I know, even with Lori, she might have mentioned when she was here for the provincial election, is that we don't care who enacts great policy, as long as it gets enacted, right? And without great opposition to make sure that people are being held accountable for their actions, we can't guarantee that that's going to be, that policies are going to come forward that will benefit us. And so I'm going to follow that by saying it doesn't matter how many seats you have in the House, it's the work that you get done. Canada is foundationally built on rural communities that work together. If you've had a job, you know that in a small area, you might not get along with everybody. However, there's a job that needs to get done. And you need to be able to work through your differences with other people to get that job done, especially in a workplace. Same thing works for our communities. We need them to survive. We need them to thrive. We're used to working with each other. We're used to taking care of our neighbors and having our neighbors take care of us. Even if we don't align politically, there are still values that we share that we can motivate people to work, right? Mm-hmm. So with the Green Party, even though there's a couple of seats, I would expect that they work across party lines. Even though they're small and few, our provincial government is a great example of this. Mike Schreiner is able to effectively work across party lines to get great legislation put forward. We have our major parties fighting over who's going to get a majority. I would prefer that we never had a majority. Canada doesn't have a majority. Yeah. We have a bunch of minorities that have to work together. So our left side is more center, let's be real. But our center side's split, right? And that to me says we have people critically thinking about what policies are and making active choices between those different parties. If we have only minority governments, then they should be working together to get things done. Just by saying, oh, we can't pass legislation because it doesn't have a majority, well, then you're not doing your job properly. Then you're not communicating properly and you're not advocating for your constituents properly because you've already given up before you even started. I've never found success by walking in as a leader. I've always found success by walking in as a neutral party that is able to communicate with everybody and work to lift the environment up. And I think that's what we need to do in politics. So I don't care if there's only 2 seats.
Yeah.
those 2 seats could be more effective than the rest of the House if they're doing the job properly.
And I mean, I tend to agree. Like that's kind of the hope for politics. Like even growing up, it was always just like, why can't we all just get along and go to the goal together?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't always seem to be the tone or the climate, especially during an election season right now, where everything is by nature combative.
You say combative, though. This is not a team sport.
Sure.
Right? We're not competing with each other. That's not the point of this. The point is to have differences in opinions that create diversity in ideas. And it takes all colors to make a rainbow, right? Everybody's input is important, regardless if that's what progresses. Again, great opposition leads to great ideas.
That's right. Well, and I like the idea of a minority government as well, because then there's some brakes on this train, right? Like, then we need some brakes sometimes, and to reconsider things and really make sure that we're prioritized towards the right things. Speaking of the right things, we have a housing crisis in our country, not just in our community, but across the entire country that's been, around for almost a decade now. Where do you see, I guess, the initial... How did we get to this place? And we'll get into kind of the green platform on housing, but how did we get to this place where housing is just completely unaffordable or unattainable?
How did we get here?
Yeah, how did we get here?
We got here because we never considered housing to be a human right, and instead we allowed it to become a stock market. We have allowed for foreign investors to buy up our properties. We've allowed for corporations to buy up our properties. We have no legislation that mandates what an affordable property is to make sure that things stay affordable. We have provinces that are lifting their rent control. We don't have anything in place to protect people when it comes to homes, because we are trying to profit on homes all of the time. Right? And building single family homes when the needs of the communities don't necessarily necessitate single family homes. Right? We have not actively, well, actually we haven't done any major housing initiatives in over 30 years, first of all.
Yeah, I think the federal government canceled government housing back in the 90s, right?
Yeah, so I'm going to just take a step back. We have a problem and we have solutions. We don't have leadership that's willing to actually go ahead and take the risk in enacting those solutions properly. There's nothing that we can't solve with enough research and motivation and goals and plans. Absolutely nothing. So if we've been struggling with this issue for over a decade, then that is a failure on our leaders to resolve our problems. Simple as that. Because they're not prioritizing it, right? What are they prioritizing then? Because it's not our needs, right? If your manager was bringing forth a shortcoming in the business repeatedly, right, and complaining to you and saying, oh, this is such a bad issue, as an employee, you would think to yourself, well, you have the power to fix this, not me. I'm just here trying to support you in this business. So why can't we do that with our politicians? Why can't we turn around and say, enough's enough. Stop whatever you're doing that is not our priority. Let's put this as a priority and fix it so we can move on to other things that are more important, like protecting yourself from the upcoming climate crisis that we're already experiencing, right? Other issues that when it comes to affordability, so we're dealing with food insecurity, we're dealing with lack of access to healthcare, we're dealing with lack of access to affordable living. Pick one issue, fix it, and then move on to the next issue. But instead of dragging all these things on for years and years and years and creating political differences and how we're going to resolve it with no resolutions isn't progress.
Well, how effective do you think that the federal government, whatever party ends up in power, how effective are they in actually changing the housing crisis that we're in? Because we do have multiple levels of government that take very important different jurisdictions and different things. Like infrastructure is primarily funded by the provincial government. You have permitting and zoning that's done by the municipalities.
Right.
Where does the federal government come in to actually solve this problem? What is the practical thing when you are dealing with different levels of government that aren't on the same page and have different motivations?
Right. Okay, so the way I'm going to answer that is to say that any time that we've had a crisis or emergency, our country has indicated that's a crisis emergency. And as soon as you do that, it opens the doors for quickly enacting legislation to resolve that, right? So if we really wanted to fix the housing crisis like it is, we could label it a crisis and then mobilize a team to deal with the crisis like we do with wildfires or floods, anything like that. From that, I would say that we need an intergovernmental team to work because we need all three levels on the same page, because we need municipalities to make a bid on what buildings or types of housing would immediately resolve their housing issues. Then we need from there the provincial government to establish how we can build the infrastructure required to support that housing. And then we need the federal government to help fund all of that to get it done immediately. Once it's resolved, then we can work on the specific details, but by not making anything happen, we're just creating a bigger issue with supply as it goes. There was a second part to that I think I might be missing.
What is the practical side? What are the policies that we can actually implement that will affect the change, that will solve this problem from the federal side of things?
Yeah. So like I said, I think that the policy would be mobilizing a team by qualifying it as a crisis or an emergency. Because when we put those technical labels on things, we're able to easily remove the red tape that resolves issues.
Does that mean overstepping some of the municipal authority on certain things? Is that what that implies?
No, I think that means, because if we're going to be working on it intergovernmentally, which I know isn't a word, but I love it so much.
It's a great word. No, I'm for it.
Okay,
Let's
cool,
do it. Yeah,
cool,
intergovernmental.
cool.
That's great.
Right? Like I said, the conversations start from the ground up, being municipal. The municipalities say, make their bids to say, we need 40,000 units put up. We have 16 vacant buildings that could be retrofitted. There is an opportunity for 20,000 acres to be converted. I don't think that taking anything away from the municipalities would help, but having municipalities at the forefront of what they're being able to communicate what their needs are, and then using our higher levels of government to resolve those issues for them immediately.
Okay. Because there is this whole not in my backyard
movements
in not just our community, but many, but specifically in the county. Thank God we had the Queen Elizabeth project is moving forward, which is great, and we need that. But there's a lot of opposition to things like this. So that's why I ask, because like the municipalities, they end up kind of they're kind of hamstrung to what their constituency wants as well. So regardless of what they need, because I think the most people in the county, you're a resident of the county, as am I, that we need more doors, we need more housing, we need attainable and sustainable housing.
Right.
But if you have people who are saying, no, I'm going to veto this zoning change because it's in my neighborhood, how do we go about that? Because this is, Doug Ford just enforced the mayors to have, with the Strong Mayors Act, to be able to push more things through. But short of that, that's kind of still, how does the federal government tie into that part of it?
Leadership. The leadership needs to come top down. We need to advocate for a collective initiative to resolve the housing crisis, and communicate to people that they're going to need to make sacrifices in order to achieve this goal, because it's a goal that is necessary right now, right? And like when I suggested earlier that we work out the finer details later, absolutely. But I think that Canadians are willing to work together more than we give them credit for. But there's a divisionary and problem we have right now, that we're acting more like Americans. We don't have the same kind of individualism. We don't see the same success as they do there with that. They have the population to support individualism and to say that in my neighborhood, I want it only the way it look a certain way and the people to act a certain way. Well, there's enough people that you can move. Right? We don't have that option here. And especially with people that have grown up in certain areas, they're not willing to move. They're not willing to relocate just because you don't want a fourplex. put up in your neighborhood to resolve the housing crisis. This is a crisis. You can't complain that there are people on the streets and homelessness and tent cities, then also simultaneously say, but don't build them homes in my area, please. Don't build supportive housing to get people off the street in a place that I can see it. These are our people. We don't need to isolate them to different parts of the community because they've maybe experienced some hardships in their life. How many people have you been who are given opportunities and lifted up? Exceed. A lot of them. Some people fall through the cracks. Some people just need more support. And some people, when everybody has a home, will still choose not to have a home because that's their choice, right? But with these kind of initiatives, we need our leadership all aligned, and we need the communication to be straightforward from everybody to say, right now, let's fix the issue. And if we need to make adjustments later, we can, right? Mm-hmm. And if a building goes up that you don't think it's pretty right now, but it supports 5 or 6 families, hey, when we have better housing options, maybe that place becomes a community center instead in the future, or another school, right? The way that we can take properties and transform them into great homes. We can also take homes when they're no longer needed and transform them into great properties. Nothing's stagnant about us right now, right? Mm-hmm. And finding a solution is more important, I think, than worrying about aesthetics at the moment. But
yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. I think let's get people in a house somewhere warm, especially in Canadian winters. That seems to be and I think as Canadians, you're right. We are. That is part of our culture to really work together to do that.
And diversify housing, right? We can have multiplexes. Yes. We can have conversions. If the
mixed zoning,
it's
wonderful.
Exactly.
I was in Kelowna and I went to a Shoppers Drug Mart, and there was apartments above it. But done aesthetically well. Not like, oh, gross, it's an apartment above the store. It was really well done, and actually in a nice part of town, too.
Can you imagine an apartment above a store with a daycare and a bus stop?
There you go. Yeah.
Give opportunities for women to be successful. Mm-hmm. If you want us to grow beautiful families, we need to support our women better. Mm-hmm. And affordable, accessible housing is the easiest way to do that. Mm-hmm. We spend more money trying to prevent people with housing issues from accessing our emergency departments than we would if we actually just built supportive centers for people to live in.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so it's an investment. And if we want to look at it as a business, any investments that we make will garnish us a greater return in the end. Mm-hmm. And we can always change things later. But we don't have that option right now because we don't have any options for people at all. Yeah.
I was looking at the Greens platform, and I have a question about viewing housing as a human right and not a commodity. Mm-hmm. Now, first off, can you explain exactly what that means? Because I have a question about a bit of the nuance about what that means in the class structure that we do have here in Canada. What does that mean exactly?
Well, declaring it a human right is similarly to what I was talking about, declaring it an emergency or a crisis. As soon as you put that label on something, it gives you access to fix the problem, right? Or to provide resources, because now it's part of our Constitution that you deserve that. And it just gives us more options to resolve the problem faster.
So moving it away from commoditization, this I think is targeted more so on the investor corporation side. Is that right? Is that also applied to the individual as well, though? Like where's that commodity line as far as the
line? So the commodity line is preventing corporations from buying housing is the primary part there, and closing loopholes where dirty money is invested into properties. That's where that line is being drawn. Our corporations should not be owning homes. Mm-hmm. And we need to prevent future purchases because those are taking affordable housing off of the market that we need right now.
Right. Because my thought has always been on the municipal side is like good deals to like section that out, where because you need incentive for developers to build, of course they need to make their money, so even percentaging things out where it's like, okay, 60% is going to be do what you want, but the 40% is going to have to be individual rental or home like individual owners. Because the reason I asked about the commodity issue is because as a private citizen who is invested in real estate, it's really the thing that has established the middle class in the past 100 years, and it's the thing that actually, I believe, enables us to really stimulate our economy on the local side. Because if I own my house, I now have leverage with the bank to maybe make an investment into a business or into another real estate listing, something like that. And that's where, when I see against commodity, it's like, well, it's a commodity for me, and that's why I want the clarification, because there is this point where, especially say I have maybe 2 or 3 properties, and now it's a corporation that owns that. It's the nuance there matters, I think. And that's where, for me, I get a little thrown with it, because but I understand what you're saying. Like we still have a need over here that needs to be fixed. And is that the hurt that you may be talking about? Is that some people who may have that upward momentum may need to like sacrifice that for the housing as a human right to develop? Is that what you mean for that?
I know what I mean is that any housing that is built publicly needs to be covenanted to be affordable for indefinite, right? So anything that we put up has to be within 30% of the median income. That's what affordable means. Standardizing what affordable means, so that when we do put these new buildings up, that people can access them and they can stay accessible forever. And we're not allowing corporations to buy them after and double the rent. That's where that is. Not de-incentivizing residents to purchase housing. That's not what it is. We're trying to get corporate fingers out, foreign investment out, so that we can open the supply up again and have a more reasonable and more affordable, accessible housing market for us. That's it.
I think that the word affordable gets tricky because it's based off of these equations. I think CMHC also has this equation for affordability. But what I've learned actually recently, do you know Ken Howe? He's at Pinecrest Housing. They're turning Pinecrest Elementary into housing. So they're running into an issue because they want to convert it into affordable senior housing. Okay, great. Which is great, which is the exact idea. Let's repurpose these empty buildings that are sitting there collecting dust and make them affordable housing. The problem that he's run into is that the CMHC equation hasn't been updated for what the average rents are now up for the past 10 years. So based on their numbers, he no longer qualifies for that funding. So it seems like there's this kind of red tape in the equations that needs to be addressed. Is that something that the Greens have looked at as far as kind of
the communication I've received is that it's 30%. Yeah. And that's just a hard line, and that will work for most communities. We should be opening up discussions, and by declaring it a human right, we can remove some of the red tape. Maybe that is preventing developers or preventing enthusiasts from helping us resolve these issues. But that's because we need solutions, and we need a dedicated initiative from our top level to say, this is how we're going to resolve it. If you're running into a specific circumstance that doesn't fit the program that we've set out, then we need, an alternative department to review those. Like there are ways to work around things, and there are ways to make sure that people can get access to housing, but we're just not making it a priority for ourselves. We're just talking about it constantly since the last election. And we're having the same conversations as I did 4 years ago. And that's sad. Something should have changed by now. But it hasn't. Why? Leaders. We don't have leaders. We don't have focus. Maybe we need to be having weekly team meetings about the housing so that it gets resolved. Whatever you need to do, take an agile approach to it if that's what we need to do. But we're not doing that.
No, I think that's it. I mean, that's my biggest complaint is effective leadership and the management that follows through.
Absolutely.
There. And that's,
if Canada was a business, we'd be out of business. That's for sure. We're not meeting the needs of our customers. We're providing underfunded services. Hey, that's a recipe for disaster if you're running a business.
Let's get into a bit of environmental and sustainability. As the name suggests of your party, you're pro green and green initiatives. What are some of the big things that you would want to see tackled in our area here as far as green initiatives or policies that need to be changed?
In this area, well, I'm going to say that our major climate concern at the moment would be our water. The temperature rising creates different environments with our water that could cause issues, like obviously the growth of bacteria. Warmer our water is, the easier it is. But that also affects habitat for local wildlife, and it creates an issue with the amount of runoff that we have from farming and other agriculture into our water. So our major climate concern is the water, I'm going to say. But that's because everything's heating. So I think that in order to help our local initiatives, we need to look at a national initiative, and obviously reducing our carbon emissions is a priority. We have, I'm just going to preface this by saying we have international agreements with our trading partners that dictate we have to have a carbon reduction plan. Otherwise, we're going to experience tariffs when trading with those partners. So, you know, I don't care how you feel about climate change or how you think that it's going. Internationally, there's progress, and we have commitments for that. So one of the biggest avenues that we're thinking about taking is eliminating any new fossil fuel projects. I know that's a big deal. We do have a lot of corporate funding that goes into our fossil fuel projects, so we can take that money, if we're not going to be creating any new projects, and put that into retraining our fossil fuel sector workers. I'm just going to go and segue into a really cool initiative that we're doing right now. It's called the National Defense Corps. Have you heard about this?
I just took a look at it this week. Yeah.
So it's 120,000 strong National Defense Corps. So the point of it being is, well, obviously we'll take priority of people who are trying to get out of industries that are harmful for our climate and that we're not going to be funding anymore, and giving them an opportunity for a new career. The National Defense Corps is going to be in response to obviously securing Canada, because we are not as protected as we might have been a few months ago from our friendly neighbors. We don't feel as confident in that. But also not just for national civil defense, but also for dealing with climate disasters as they come up. When it comes for fires and floods and all these different things that are dispersing people from their homes, having an organized group that can help deal with that would greatly benefit us, right? And then similarly, the Defense Corps is also, in addition to the Defense Corps, we're going to increase our National Reserve by 20,000 as well, and just have a strong group that is willing to help us as we deal with all the difficult issues of going forward.
Is this kind of like a Canadian National Guard kind of thing with intention? Yeah. And also securing our rangers in the north and including in Indigenous communities and how to support security in the north. It's a whole group. But what I really like about it is that this new direction is in response to the understanding that we need to move out of an industry that's not helping us anymore, and it's going to come apart eventually. We can't keep dumping money into fossil fuel when we know that other countries around the world are taking green initiatives serious. If we want a green economy, we need to get ahead of it. We need to get ahead of our research and development. We need to get ahead of our electrical grid to make sure that we can support any new transitions that we make. And in a green economy, and one of the lines I like to use is, whoever gets to the finish line first usually gets the most money. So why aren't we trying to get ahead of everybody else when it comes to this, when we know for a fact that industries do fade out after a while? And that's just a part of life, right? There's paper mills from 100 years ago. Probably sad that we have electronic printers now, right? I say we used to have steam engines. Do we use steam anymore? No, because we learned, we grew, and we adapted. And best thing for this
situation is we help people transition from climate negative industry into climate positive industries.
How do you see climate policy, like all the things you just mentioned, how does that intersect with affordability or attainability? Because even specifically for housing, if we're looking to have more green or lower carbon products, the price tag is often a lot higher. How do these things come together to meet both those goals?
I think that the best way to answer that, as a consumer, you know that if you make an investment on a bigger, a higher quality product initially, that product will last you longer, and you'll get more value out of that product over the long term. And I think that that's what we need to look at this now. Yes, green is a bigger investment. What is that going to look like down the road, though, right? How much is the climate crisis going to cost us, regardless of how green our initiatives are right now? More than we can probably count at this point, right? You can build green homes and you can build green businesses, and then a fire comes and destroys everything anyway, right? So making the investment now could help mitigate a lot of the effects that we're going to experience from the climate crisis or the existing climate crisis. And when you look at price tags, for me, that's where I want to say. I want to say that the initial upfront costs seems like a lot, but what will it save us in our future? Yeah.
And does that investment, is that coming out of the consumer directly, or is this something that should be subsidized across the board? Because when we have people who are still struggling to get into any housing, when we are saying, okay, it's a bigger investment, that attainable word, so that's why I think it's so effective, is it's moving that goalpost a bit further away. Right. Though, yes, crisis here, but the marrying them together, is that then in the way of federal funding for the different building materials, whether it's solar or concrete alternatives or things like that? Is that coming from the government, and or is this all on the consumer side of things?
Well, sorry, you like attainable, I like sustainable. That's what I look at investments. That's what I look for. No, I don't think consumers should be responsible for these types of initiatives, because if we're investing top down, this is a long-term investment in us, and we deserve that. If we're not going to be spending money, like I said, on pumping into corporations and industries that are dying, we can take some of that revenue and move it into other areas like this. The other thing is, and I know as somebody who's into real estate, that the money goes where the interest is. Right now, it's sitting in industries that aren't necessarily long-term production for us. If we were offering incentives for corporations to switch into more of a green economy, the money would shift there, if that's where the dollar is going to come from, right? And that requires leadership. Again, back to this leadership piece. We need our top-level representatives to be having these conversations to say, hey, I'm going to make you a deal. You help us build a green, affordable homes. This is what you're going to make off of it. And it'll flow, because investors are smart, and investors look towards the future when it comes to their money, right? And so I just think that if we're going to try this, we need to position it the right way, and we need to have a standard conversation across the board of why this is important and how it's going to benefit us long term and who it will benefit as well.
I think it does require a big cultural shift.
Absolutely.
And with mindset, even like, as I like to focus on the building material side of things, because we've been really set in our way of code that is established, but then we have these certain materials there, but like concrete, which is a big a carbon emitter, and we have great alternatives locally, like rammed earth. Erica locally here does it, which is awesome, but comes with that price tag again. Right. Moving away from housing and real estate, what other issues sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I do want to say, I think the way to look at this would be that if you were to put up a high-rise building and the engineer said to you, hey, I really think it'd be worthwhile researching the sway of this material in the face of a strong wind. and you say, it's going to cost me extra amount of money, right? Well, then you put up your building and the building falls. Okay. Was it worth that money to figure out if the sway of that material was going to be a risk? Absolutely. And I think that's the same thing when it comes to green materials. If we're going to be investing in green materials that can withstand the changing climate dynamics that we're experiencing in a way that maybe the homes that we're currently building can't, then it's absolutely worth that investment, right? High winds, water protection, all of these things that keep heat inside of your home to reduce your costs. I believe in making a bit more of a smart investment initially if it will have residual benefits for us in the future. That's it. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, that's right. No, that's great. Thanks for adding that. Well, I mean, I'm like a big advocate for hemp. Like, I think hemp is like the greatest material in the world. It's like it takes a season to grow. And it's so easy to keep growing, and you can put it in anything.
Absolutely.
But you can look back. You don't have to look back too far, but back in the 50s when they had their anti-cannabis campaigns that really funded by a certain industry that have completely decimated any kind of development in that, and which has made anybody who is producing hemp, you just don't have the demand for it because we're so set in these other materials.
Right. And that's an alternative solution. That's great. So if you do you not think that if the federal government were to say, hey, we're building all new homes with hemps, how many farmers would switch over to growing hemp? Right. This is industry shifts with demand, and we need leadership to create the shift so that we can have social progression in the areas that we require by coming up with alternative solutions and changing the dynamics of the market. And who are we getting supplies from? Maybe we don't need wood for everything. Maybe we could use hemp, and maybe we could use hemp to get up homes faster, and maybe they're more sustainable. That's a great way to go about it.
Yeah. And multi-purpose.
You
can use it for literally anything.
Exactly. See, clothes,
textile,
books,
building, books, everything.
Everything. I am pro hemp, so you just hit a nerve with me about that. That's so
I'm just
funny.
a big hippie, so I'm just like I get really frustrated when it's like, why is this not a thing? My dream in another reality is to be a hemp farmer and just produce hemp products, but like I say, like it tends to be the hippie thing because that's what you can buy hemp stuff at your farmer's market.
Absolutely.
And that's about it. But not on the big manufacturing scale, which I think
why
it really
is
should
that?
be.
Because our suppliers prefer plastic, or our suppliers.
I think we also have a lobbying problem in our country where it's kind of it's a tough thing because you need the support of industries 100%. To get into power, and you need the support of the industries to boost the economy, but then you're kind of forced to scratch their back, which is corruption, kind of, not really, but that's the system we have. Exactly. And that seems to be incredibly broken to me.
And we've got two parties that are working for the same people. Regardless of what you want to look at it, they're being supported and funded by the industries that we need to necessarily move away from, or having conversations with them to say, we need you to help us progress.
So how do we fix that as far as electoral reform? Because I know that's in the Green platform as well.
Absolutely.
What does that look like practically? Because anytime you say electoral reform, it's
proportional representation. That's what that looks like.
So,
right?
and what does that mean practically?
That means that based on the number of votes, popular votes that you have, your party gets that number of seats in the House.
So does that move away from your local being able to vote for your local representative then? How does that work on that side?
I don't know how that would work.
Okay.
How exactly how that would look in the Canadian system to keep with our to keep us stable at the moment.
Right. Yeah. Well, it's a tricky thing, right? Yes. Because what did Churchill say about capitalism? It's like it's the worst system out there except for all the rest. I feel that way. I feel that way about our system of government as well, because I really like that we have a symbolic branch of government. I think it plays an essential role in scapegoating a lot of the pomp and circumstance and deification of our leaders, like we see south of the border, where you've created these gods essentially
Yep.
of these parties, where we get to say, no, that's the crown, and
Yeah.
you're just one of the plebs like us, you know. You're
I think it was also Churchill that said, it takes great courage to stand up, but it also takes great courage to sit down and listen. And I think that that's when we're talking about this in electoral reform, that's what the point is. We need to be able to take a step back and listen to everybody and get everybody's opinion and formulate a plan based on that, instead of what our current political climate is: bickering and hate and comparing who's got bigger crowd sizes. And through that, we're not getting anything done. And it's just getting worse. Foreign interference in our election is tearing us apart from the inside out. And we've seen how successful that was in the States, and it's creeping up here. And I'm going to go back to say, this isn't a team sport. We are not against each other. We're all trying to work towards similar goals. How we get there is the party that you pick. But it's not trying to defeat someone else in that race.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of what's going on down south, we're still in the midst of this yo-yo of tariff, tariff on, off. No idea what's happening. What's your take on this tariff situation and how it's going to potentially impact our riding here?
I think that for a lot of Canadians who were already buying Canadian, this just really reassured them that they've been making great decisions for a long period of time. And now that we've got more people on board, it's a lot easier to find Canadian products. I don't want to give any light to the orange menace that we have currently causing so much problems. But what we can do in Canada to mitigate the worst of that is to diversify our trading partners. Canada has an amazing reputation on internationally. We have an advantage right now where we can use that reputation to garner better trading relationships with international groups. Also, one focus that I really like with the Green Party is creating a national strategic reserve of our resources. That'll allow Canadian jobs to stay here. We can offer a Saving Canada bond for people to invest, and we can maintain our prices of potash, aluminum, bitumen with these strategic reserves, so that we can stabilize ourselves through this rocky period that hopefully is only 4 years, right? We, as Canadians, are resilient. That is one of those great things of prides, and where we don't necessarily have a national pride, and that's kind of the Canadian identity. Your Canadian identity is relative to where you grew up. And so not everybody had the exact same experience, but one part of it is that you got to be tough if you want to be Canadian. I heard that a couple of years ago, and it has always really stuck with me, because it's true. We need to be tough. We need to sometimes take a step back from our pride and ask for help where necessary, or help others when we see them struggling, because we know that the stronger our community is, the more successful all of us would be. So in the face of tariffs, we're going to see a lot of hardships, but it's nothing that we haven't weathered before. And it just affirms that Canadians' solidarity and sovereignty is critical. We are not Americans, and we never will be.
Amen. That is like one of the best silver lining of this whole thing. This 51st state rhetoric nonsense is that there is this real sense of Canadian pride coming back, and it's like, because I'm not American, I'm a Canadian, and there is a distinct difference.
We even have
though
Quebec
sometimes
on board.
in minor ways, but we are majorly very different, and have very much a different national identity, and which is always evolving too and changing.
Absolutely,
and that's one of the things that makes us Canadian. With this tumultuous time,
it's exciting.
But it's also terrifying, and especially on the economic side. So when we have all these threats of tariffs being, especially on a lot of our natural resources, even our hydrocarbon industry, that is being affected. So Carney basically eliminated a big portion of the carbon tax. His words to mitigate some of this economic turmoil that we're in. How do we like that obviously then goes against green initiatives. How do we, what's the nuance there? How can we afford to sacrifice climate incentives for our economy? How long does that take? And was that the right call by Mark Carney?
Okay. That's a great question. So the carbon tax was the best answer that our economists came up with for a consumer, the carbon tax was the best solution that we had, and the people didn't want it. There's only so much you can do when it comes to the will of your people. We created a lot of animosity behind the carbon tax by this divisionary politics, and it would have been a defeatist of Carney to not have done something about it right away, because there was so much call to action around it. Was it a smart decision? Probably not. Was what we needed? Absolutely not. We do need, like I said before, we have commitments that obligations to reduce our carbon emissions. And if you don't like the option of a carbon tax, there has to be another avenue to reduce our emissions, regardless of how you feel about it. And I don't even think that Carney, based on his book, he was an advocate for removing the carbon tax, but he did what the people are asking for. And in a difficult political climate that we're experiencing, sometimes you just have to do what the people want in order to be able to move on from it.
Especially in an election month.
Especially in election month. Yeah, it's disappointing in a lot of ways, but hey, I mean, sometimes legislation pulls society. Most of the time, society pulls the legislation. And that's just the reality we live in.
So moving forward in the Bay of Quinte, the next 4 years, or even beyond, what is your vision for this riding? Like what kind of future do you hope to shape here?
Would you like my dream?
Yes, please.
Okay,
give me the dream.
So I have a dream of eventually creating a Quinte Learning Center. So a center that allows for community members to access resources, programs, lessons, whatever they need or whatever we need to support us. We live in since we're actually switching over into this very individualistic society, which doesn't necessarily work in Canada very well, I'd like to create a home base so that people have the ability to learn from each other. One of the worst problems of individualism is support and learning skills. There's a lot of teaching that happens when multiple generations are together that we don't have anymore. We allow our seniors to go live in homes and be isolated for
We've had a breakdown of community.
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. And from that comes cooking lessons and recipes and teaching how to piano and playing music or how to do your taxes, and especially since people have been steering away from religious groups and the church used to provide a huge...
Yeah, they were the community center.
They were the community center. And that's one advantage I would say that the U.S. has right now is that they're very church-based communities. So even though they're kind of all for themselves, they still find
there's
community.
a huge utility in religion for the sake of community. Definitely.
Right. And we don't have that here in the same capacity, especially since we have a very highly educated, very critical thinking group. From that, unfortunately, a lot of people kind of step away from their religious upbringing, or maybe they're disappointed with some of the actions that they've seen from the church, or they don't necessarily align the same way as they might have. So a community center that is publicly funded, that allows everybody from all the demographics to access and gain a knowledge or just be able to be involved in something that's a little bit bigger than them it'll help create a closeness that we haven't had in a long time that isn't based in religion. And this idea extends from the fact when I was a kid, way back, that there were youth groups. I could go to a youth group on a Friday or Wednesday evening, and I would be with a fun group of people, and we would do some kind of activity, and it didn't cost a lot of money, but it was important. But those youth groups were only ever run out of a church. And some people who maybe necessarily didn't fit the norm, didn't feel welcome in those environments, knowing that those places had a tendency to not allow them through the door, or say that their lifestyle might put them in bad places in the future, right? We don't need that. What we do need is community, and we do need support, and we do need places where women and seniors can go, where they can feel like they're involved, and that they're useful, and that they have things to provide for other people, and that other people can go there and access resources that they maybe never got at home because both of their parents worked 40-hour work weeks and they spent most of the time with their babysitter. And that's a great life. But you lose part of generational teachings in those types of environments, right. And that's what we've created.
I love the vision of community building. I think it's really so many people are craving. And I think if COVID really shone a light on anything, it was that we are deeply, deeply craving community.
Absolutely.
And genuine, authentic, intergenerational community.
Yeah.
And that's where I think one of the silver linings of the housing crisis is we're kind of now rethinking multi-generational living.
Absolutely.
And I think there's so much that we lose from staying in our own generation. We're not gleaning the lessons from those who have come before us, and we're coming in blind, and we get smacked by the world because that wisdom hasn't been imparted down on multiple levels, whether it's from cooking to life lessons to relationships and things like that. Yeah. So my wife actually, like when we first got together, her big vision was very similar, but it was a housing complex that had basically all those resources built in. The problem, I think, with so many of housing complexes that have come in the past, they become derelict over time, where there's not the proper investment, not just financially, but socially into these spaces. And it becomes the marginalized groups that tend to be in there. And there's a big divide on the class side. Right. And that's something that that I see as very frustrating in our time here, whereas we're seeing a bigger class divide. Absolutely. And between the haves and have-nots. And that's
access.
100%. And for essentials like food, like we have food insecurity is rampant in our own community.
30%.
That's wild. That's nuts.
That is nuts.
That's absolutely unacceptable in one of the wealthiest quote unquote countries in the world.
Absolutely.
It's absolutely unacceptable.
So then why did our local representative vote against a national food program? If 30% of residents of Bay of Quinte are food insecure, why did he vote against the national food program? Our children are foundation of our society.
I'll ask him next week. He's coming on.
There's a couple.
Yes.
I'll ask him tonight at the debate.
That's right. Yeah,
I can't wait.
Yeah. How are you feeling about the debate? You've done them before, correct? Yeah. So what's different about this one? How are you feeling going into it?
So the first time I did it, I didn't know what I was doing, and I was there to communicate a platform. The second time I did it, I was there to communicate a platform, but also encourage people to be proactive in the community about this. This time around, I am strictly there to call out the inaction as I've seen it since the last time I was in this position. Things have changed. I've gained experience, and I've watched what's happened, and I've watched that nothing has changed in a lot of ways, and the blame game is just getting even bigger. So hopefully maintain a decent amount of composure, but definitely going in a lot more feisty than I would have been last time.
Well, I'm excited to watch it. This is gonna be great.
I'm keep calm and polite because that's what I am.
Yeah, we're Canadian after all. We're Canadian. Yes. Politeness is very much part of our identity.
It's so funny. Oh, just about the Community Learning Center. I think that the way I've been playing this out in my head is I start with a room. I start by renting an office space or a room, and then host lessons all day, and then as it grows, we can expand the space. As cool as like open mics on a couple evenings that allow, local poets and musicians opportunities to perform in a safe environment. There's so much opportunity to create avenues for people to be a part of something that we just don't have in the same capacity. That's not, you got to pay money for. And that's the other reason I want to do this is I grew up with a very privileged upbringing. I'm not saying that, my parents were rich, but they gave me a lot of access to stuff that I'm really lucky to look back on and say that I had access to. But it also made me realize as I got older that I was only given access to that because of my parents. That's not a same kind of standard that everybody else were to give. And the more access you have to learning and development and that, the better success you'll experience in your future. Even if it is as simple as a piano lesson or being a part of a band, there's confidence that is gained from that that might not, as a manager at Walmart, express, but boy, that the ability to apply for that position came from the fact that I was given an opportunity in my past to develop my confidence and
that
sure of
compounds.
myself.
That compounds over time.
I'm not working for Walmart. I'm not saying that, but it, that's an attainable position that someone would be proud of to achieve, and that's okay. We want everyone to find success in whatever way that they can based on their skills and what they're able to provide, but not have a leveling playing field where everybody can have access to skill development. That is increasing the divide between our success and the people who are not having a good time, for sure.
For those who haven't considered voting Green before, what message would you leave with them? What do you want to say to them?
Look at our policies and our plan, and if it aligns with how you see Canada looking in the future, then we're the vote for you. And understand that as a candidate for the Green Party in the Bay of Quinte, I can actually vote on behalf of the Bay of Quinte. I can vote with integrity, given feedback from our constituents. Because we are a grassroots initiative. We're not being whipped by our party leaders when we go to Parliament on what we need to vote on. And that makes us different than everybody else. Also, we use science. These are not negotiable items. These are policy based on facts. Right? And facts can grow and change, and I'm willing to grow and change. And we are willing to grow and change as the Green Party. That's one of the most amazing things about us. We're constantly evolving as we gain new information, and we're able to come up with better, more innovative solutions for our ongoing issues.
Now, we talked about a bit off camera, but how voter turnout's kind of in the tank. It's there's so many people who are apathetic to politics, partially as a result of the past, how many years down south of the border and that polarization. So people have kind of disengaged from the political conversation. What would you say to people to try and bring them back?
Every vote counts. I know that you hear that all the time, but every vote does count. And there are people all over the world that would be grateful to have the opportunity to vote, and we just give it up. We give it up. We're not willing to fight for what we want. We're not willing to stand up for what we need. And that's not because we're not strong. It has nothing to do with our resilience or our capacity. It's the fear of being torn down, and we have violence. Like for me as a candidate, I'm trying to keep a lot of my private life private because I'm actually afraid of the consequences that I might experience by being a more public figure that people have access to. So if you are apathetic and you're not voting because it's just not something you're interested in, you're causing more problems for everybody else. We need you to vote, regardless if you want to or not. I need you to vote, even if it's not for me, because that means that the representation that we're sending to Parliament actually reflects the opinions of the people in this area and not just the best choice because you got 40% when the 60% voted for the three other parties. Right? That's not fair to us. And it's not It's your civic duty to contribute. And I'm really sorry if you don't want to get up and do it. There's lots of options. There's so many ways. And I'll come pick you up. If you can't get to the polls, I would just email me and I'll come pick you up and drive you, because it's that important that you get out there and you voice your opinion, even if you don't think it's worthwhile. It is.
Well, I second that. For those listening, if you haven't considered voting, check out the different candidates, check out the platforms, find what resonates with you, and get out and vote. If you're not registered to vote, I believe it's elections.ca. You can go to register. You get a voting card in the mail, and it'll tell you where to go. It's very simple, very easy. I even brought my kids on the provincial election. Come vote with me.
Same.
It was great. It was so cute. On the drive, they were explaining how the voting process works, and they started singing "Oh Canada" all by themselves. And as a dad, I was so proud. I was like, this is the cutest thing I've ever experienced. And they even tried to sing the French version too. And I was just like, oh my goodness, this is amazing. So anyways, please go out and vote, everybody. Erica, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me. This was fun.
Yeah, well, and if everyone doesn't know, April 28th is the date. It's a very quick election. We like to do that here in Canada. 3 elections within 1 year here in the Bay of Quinte. It's great. Hopefully this is the last one for a while, but best of luck, Erica, and thanks again for coming on.